Hey everybody, Riot Mort here, and we are back with another patch postmortem with Riot Kent, where we talk about the last patch, the things we did, what worked, what didn't, and where we screwed up royally. Because there's usually at least one of those per patch, right, Kent?
Yeah, I know where we're gonna talk about that one for this patch, but overall, this patch, feels pretty good. So I'm ready to dive in.
Yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, I think we've both been playing a decent chunk of ranked, but the other thing to remember here is this is coming off the holiday last break, and what did we do? Like Sunday night and Monday, panic, fury, throw it all together, micro patch it out, and then cross your fingers, basically.
Yeah, we talked about it in the last rundown, but that was a hectic few days to make this work, make this patch work. So
I know you like how everyone else on the team is like, "Oh, I just got back from break. I'm ramping up, taking my time," and we're like, "Man,
yeah,
foot's been on the gas since."
yeah, I know.
So, all right, well, let's talk about it. Overall, the meta is pretty diverse. I'm not gonna say it's perfect because there's definitely some strong things, some weird things. I think the new phrase has been the level 8 spirit bomb has been kind of the big meta. There's been some craziness there, but overall, you can find success with a lot of different things, and so nothing has stuck out as like insane, right? There's no Katarina, there's no Cho'Gath, there's no one thing wildly out of proportion. I don't think.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I would call out as like a maybe is like the prevalence of Yordle as an econ trait early on, but we'll be talking about that later on too.
Sure. All right, well, let's start going through the changes, so we're not here for forever. Augments, we did a bunch of readjustments of what they drop. Overall, I'm not going to go through every single one of these, but I think some of these were good. We're getting closer to balance. Some of these were off based on old information because we had to do them before the localization lock all the way back on like December 10th. So things like Mutant Crest no longer giving a Kog'Maw felt really out of date. Protector no longer giving a rank. But overall, we're getting closer. I think next patch we're doing one last round of adjustments, and then feels like the Crest and Hearts should be pretty damn close. But again, when you have 100 and whatever augments at this point, there's going to be a lot of changes every patch.
Yep, agree with that on this. We're going to continue to fine tune it basically, but yeah, this was based. Some of this were based on the old information, as you said, so those were misses.
Ardent Sensor, the attack speed, seems good. People are playing at Ardent Sensor. They're starting to figure out the Locket tech. I'm gonna call that one out now, but the Locket tech seems pretty damn good here.
Yeah, that one is fun and exciting. Works with Redemption also, so.
I mean, Redemption's good, but Locket is the instantaneous give 5 people that big attack speed.
Yep.
I think
Yep.
I'm wondering if me even saying this here is going to make it more prevalent. But well, it's a rare augment, so it's harder to do anyway. But
Yep.
Ascension, it's still good. It's like it feels closer to balance now.
Yeah, it's no longer instant take, but people are still taking it. It's still really good. So this one seems good. Big nerf though.
Cybernetic. This is a feels bad nerf, I think. I think we had to do it. It kept showing up as like a generic augment that was doing really, really well. But man, when you see that 150 HP and 10 AD on the tier 1, it looks just so pitiful.
Yeah, it's one of those weird ones where like on paper it just doesn't sound that good, but then when you have all of your units gaining 150 health, it's like that's actually pretty powerful. And then 10 AD too is like even your tanks are whacking a little bit harder. So like overall, this is just a generic out for like comps that are already really strong, can use it really well. So we had to nerf it. But yeah, I agree, it feels bad.
Duet bonus. I think this is just a slam dunk. Duet actually feels like a nice balanced tier 1 augment now.
Yep, I agree.
Lifelong learning. I think the rework was good in the sense that it's now like it doesn't feel as bad when all your units die and you get absolutely nothing. I'm still convinced this augment is mostly a trap and needs to be buffed. I think a lot of our trait specific augments are kind of in this weird state where like even when the stars align, it doesn't quite feel worth it. I know I had a game where I had Timer 3 with lifelong learning all the way up to 200% AP, and it was like, I guess.
Yeah, I think this one, it's like you struggle to get it rolling basically. Like if you can get it, if you find like an early two scholars really early on, then this is like pretty good. And I know that specific game for you didn't work out as well as you had hoped either. But like if if you take this and you don't hit a Heimer early and you like are rolling down 3-2 and you also don't hit a Heimer, it's like, oh well, now I'm screwed.
Okay. Makeshift armor. This is an interesting one because I think power-wise, this augment is finally where it should be. Like, it's a powerful augment when it's good. But it highlights two issues, I think. The first is that it doesn't feel good to pump up your unitemized champion. I think just no one's excited at the prospect of like, oh sweet, my unitemized freaking Dr. Mundo in the corner in my mutant comp has 75 armor. Woo! And then the second one is that there's just such a prevalence right now of Last Whispers, Shivs, Ionic Sparks, whatever, that like a lot of the defensive stuff right now just feels pretty low value. And so those two things is like, even if this is balanced, it's just not exciting.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the second point there, where like shreds are just really prevalent. I kind of disagree on the first point there because like having your army be super tanky, I think it's not very noticeable and appreciable, but like there is something there where like I'm watching my, unitemized tanks just survive for much longer. Or like even my innovation, it's like, oh wow, my innovation is tanky, this feels good, and buying time for my carry. So it's like I'm iffy on the first point.
I will say anecdotally, I managed to get a Cho'Gath free with no items, but all three makeshifts, and I took a big old 7th. But anecdotes. So
I mean, yeah, it's that's two characters right there, and you don't have items on it. So, but yeah, I see what you're saying.
I don't know, it's all good. Portable Forge, Death Defiance now grants 20% Omnivamp. Yeah, fine. I mean, fine item. It's okay now. It's still not really a prismatic augment, which we'll talk about in the rundown. So.
Yep, for sure.
Spellblade. Okay, can we just agree that this was a miss? I think Spellblade is too strong now. Interestingly enough, we're not reverting it either. We're gonna let it sit for a little longer. But this is a great example of where, like, I think a lot of people didn't quite realize just how good it was and how to use it. It was so high skill cap to use, and it was too risky. Also, it was like you needed to get the augment. You needed to get the augment early. You needed the items for it. But now, man, when you run into that blue buff TF with like 4 Arcanist with this, what do? You just get wrecked.
Right, yeah, I agree. I mean, I think this was an over buff, but at the same time, it's like super narrow and people weren't really wanting to take it. And so like now, players are considering like, should I pivot my strategy now to make use of this augment, which is a good thing. So yeah, we're gonna let it stay strong for a little bit longer, but agree. Like overall, we didn't really need to buff it, but we kind of wanted to, have this augment have its time in the light, basically like, hey, take this and play with it. It's fun.
I think overall, we've got some work to do on these like really narrow trait specific augments. So we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
Stand United. It feels balanced again. I mean, a 2-3-5 is kind of where it should be. This was undoing that buff from Christmas where Handshake was a little too good. I think it's good now. I will say we're right back to where we started, right? Where it's like that 2 definitely feels really small, and you're like, it's like cybernetic, but it might just be the curse of that augment,
Yeah, I agree. It just the stats don't look as strong, but when you're giving something to your entire team, it actually adds up to a lot of stats. So balance now.
Yeah, Sunfire board. It's another one that like I never feel good about taking.
Yep.
But it's also data wise looks balanced, so hard to justify buffing this one. We made the change to make it equal to Morello and Sunfire, which I think was correct. We could have maybe compensated it by having it last 10 seconds, but it's one of those augments, like I said, it's a generic one that doesn't usually feel very good to take right now.
Yeah, I mean, we don't want players taking the generic ones, or like don't want them taking, but it's like, you consider the generic one should be a little bit weaker, but this one does feel bad. It's like you read it and it's like, doesn't seem very strong. So yeah, I feel bad about nerfing this, but data wise, and also to line it up, we had to.
Woodland Charm. This one continues to perplex me because it is the second strongest 1/4 augment in the game. But if you looked at that poll I did on Twitter, there were a lot of people saying it's their least favorite augment to take at 1/4. And it's fascinating because if you compare it to like New Recruit, it's just significantly better than New Recruit at almost every stage of the game except the late game, because then you don't get the extra trait. But it's such a good augment. We can't buff it anymore, so at this point it is what it is. This might just be the, it's not level up and it's not Mercenary Soul, so it's not as exciting, so I don't like it,
Yeah, it's probably that. Just like the highs are so high that like when you see this, you're just like meh. But I mean, this was overall just a placebo buff. I don't think this changed anything. It was a good augment before this buff. It's a good augment after this buff, and so
Yeah, for reference, the best one for augment is still built diff 3.
makes sense.
All right, on to traits. Chemtech. I think the Chemtech change was healthy. It didn't really align well with some other changes we'll talk about, but
Yep.
I think Chemtech's in a good spot now. I think 7 and 9 are still underpowered, though. I know data doesn't show that. Data shows it but again, maybe with Urgot fixed, maybe. But overall, though, we needed to make this change, and I think this change was healthy.
Agree. Yeah, and just this coupled with Urgot nerfs just hit Urgot's comp pretty hard. But other than that, I think like you said, this change was good.
Imperial change. Imperials are finally playable. They're not man, the data before when we got back, Imperial was so far down it was breaking graphs. The extra damage here made a difference. Imperials are playable now. I've definitely had some success. It still requires some high rolling, and I'll also say it's kind of being carried by the back of a very early Swain. Early Swain is pretty nuts this patch. But at least Imperial's finally a comp. I literally just got wrecked today by a 5 Imperial Kaisa. The spatula item is now quite good. So yeah.
Yeah, 5 Imperial with some high cost carry as your Imperial item holder is it's a lot of damage.
Innovator 5 buffs. Good. It's funny. There's a part of me that feels like Innovator is still this comp where the power distribution is quite correct, where there's supposed to be a little more power in the automatons, like the dragon and the bear, and a little less in the champions like Jace and Seraphine specifically. But overall, the Innovator comp is pretty much where it should be, I think.
I think so too. I mean, these buffs are good. The bear serves as a really solid frontliner in the mid game when you basically have a singed or sometimes just one bodyguard somewhere Blitzcrank activating scrap. So I think these buffs were good. You might be right about the power distribution though.
Socialite 2. This change was very important to the meta. I think this is one of the most important changes. Made everything not be Socialite 3 at the end game. It opened up the end game comps quite a bit. I do think it has left Socialite a little undesirable. And it just kind of shows you how valuable this part of the Socialite trait was. If you told me Socialite 3 needed a buff now, I'd believe it. But again, very important change, and I'm glad we made it.
Agree. This change was huge. I think I think Socialite 2 is still highly desired on certain champions, so I wouldn't say this is an over nerf or anything like that. So if we need to do something more in the future, but I think Socialite 2 is where it should be now.
Syndicate 7, sweet. Syndicate 7 actually feels like a comp now. I think Shaco's a little strong, but otherwise 7 Syndicate's a cool comp to hit now, and it feels good.
Yeah, I agree.
Yordle. Okay, these changes, did they move the needle much? A little. I'm glad we made the Yordle spawn changes. Did they solve the problem? No. Yordle's is still a really good econ trait early. I do think people overestimate just how good of an econ trait it is. If you go back and look at these games, it's how much gold did they actually acquire? But I think the value is actually less sometimes in the gold than it is the 2-star Poppy, 2-star Ziggs, and now I actually save a bunch of health because I have free 2-star units.
Right.
And then I can transition and not have to ever roll down as much. Basically, your level 6-3-2, there's a lot more 40 and 50 gold people than there are 20 and 30 gold people like there used to be, because this has stabilized your board so much. So in that regard, this might have actually been a mistake. And it just kind of shows that if Yordle's sticking around for the mid set, that we've got a problem to solve. And we've got to, the power distribution is clearly messed up here somewhere.
Yep. Basically, I agree with everything you just said. So,
and then the 6 Yordle change, I don't think that moved the needle enough. This is another example where I think if Yordle is staying for the mid set, that this mana reduction might either need to be cranked up a bunch, or again power in Heimer or something. But 6 Yordle is still a very, very high roll only kind of comp. I know you got beat by that Tristana that one game, but I know at the same time I've hit perfect Heimer 3 everything, and it's So.
You know, yeah, it's talking that a little bit from a designer's perspective, I guess. It's like we can't balance straight, like just basically based on one, the data, and two, just our own experiences. Because
Yep.
in my experience, Tristana sucks. Every time I play Tristana, this unit is so bad. And anytime I play against another Tristana or like Mort plays Tristana, it's like this unit is great. It's like, so, you know, we have different experiences, and having the two experiences and bringing it together and to talk about why the data is the way it is, that kind of stuff is really helpful for balance. And so as we have more different perspectives and different experiences, when we have these balance conversations, it's really helpful for deciding how to go about nerfing or buffing a specific trait or unit.
Okay, Caitlyn, this was like one of the 2 changes that we did before the break, where we nerfed Caitlyn 3.
Oh yeah.
I think it was a good change. I now sometimes see Caitlyn not kill the thing she was ulting late game.
Yeah, because sometimes she hits the hex core. That's why.
Yeah, damn it. You're not wrong. Ouch. But I will say, because it's a note here, and we'll talk about it a little later with the small change too, but like that Ligma comp has been so resilient to nerfs. It is shocking how good that comp still is.
Yeah. Still one of the best reroll comps out there.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Swain change. You know, I think this is a debatable one, but I do think it is nice that Swain is an exciting like, if you get an early 2-star, 2-cost Swain, it's good, and it should be. Like, you feel good about it. And so I think the one thing is, like, it's also a very good meta for him because everyone's playing bodyguards, and so he's kind of like the anti-bodyguard frontline right now. So if that meta changes, will that still be true? Like, if Bruiser's got a lot better, would he still be as good? But overall, though, I still think this change was correct.
Same. I think this change was correct. Maybe he hits a little too hard, but that's not something we touched here. But watching like an IHHE Imperial Swain 3, oh man, that unit's a crank.
And again, fun stuff is good, right? Like having these, right. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, glad to see him be like a viable Imperial carry now.
Yeah.
That wasn't really a thing in the past, so.
Yeah. Heimerdinger, we upped the range because we thought this was a spicy change. I think it was just a good change. I think Heimerdinger's easier to play. You know my feelings on Heimerdinger. I still think he's underpowered. I've seen people have some success with him, but like overall, he's way too item specific. He's way too comp specific. But this change overall was good, and I'm glad we made it.
Yeah, Heimer's supposed to be kind of one of our premier 3-cost carriers, and this was one of the changes we would hope would push him there. Didn't end up being that way. He's still really good. I mean, but he's just not he's not really, really good and not flexible at all, and pretty difficult to play in general. So it was a good change. Could have gone farther.
Malzahar, we nerfed Malz 1, correct. You could argue this is supposed to be 625, maybe even 600. I think Malz 1 is still really good in stage 2.
Yep.
But Malz 2 is where he should be. I still think this is a buff to Malz 3 also. Malz 3 to me still feels a little weak, but it's very specific based on the mutant, right? Like, obviously, when you get the Astro mutant variation, like,
right,
he's great. But any other variation, so.
Yeah, look at more here, pushing for more Malzahar. No, I'm just kidding.
You're not wrong. No, I mean,
say that every time.
so let's be honest. I actually did put a Malz 3 buff in the next patch, and then we pulled it because data-wise he looks correct. So this is a good example where even someone like me can have his cognitive biases a little bit, and so it is good to keep them in check. I admit some biases towards Malz being successful, so, but at least I know them. I know my biases.
Yeah, when we looked at the data, and Mort was really quick to be like, yeah, I think we should pull these buffs also. Yep. So, but yeah, I think this was a good change. I think I agree. Maybe we could have gone to 625, but overall, like, Malzahar is in a much better spot than he was last patch.
Okay. Ooh, this is actually one of our misses, I think. Seraphine, we wanted to buff her, and we were kind of making up for the Socialite nerf, the Morello nerf, because the Morello nerf was also hitting Seraph, because a lot of people in the previous patch were playing Morello Seraphine. But I think buffing the healing here on top of the mana created this situation now where, especially with Chalice, which we'll also talk about, you can now get into situations where Seraphine goes infinite, where it's just like, you get her low and then she casts her spell and she has so much AP and that number multiplies that she just heals herself to full, and it's gross. It's not good.
Yeah, the thing we didn't catch here was this combined with Chalice and how good Chalice is with comps that she plays or that she's commonly played in. So that's probably the big miss here.
Urgot. So the Urgot change here I think was correct, where he doesn't proc basic attacks as much because now he doesn't need literally Hurricane and shit. That part's good. The part we messed up on, and again, I think it's excusable with 1 day to prepare everything, but he needed compensation buffs. Urgot is still okay in stage 4 if you 2-star him and have a 3-item version and maybe get something like a Knife's Edge or a Titanic Force. Like, I have first placed with Urgot. It requires a real good high roll. But compared to the other stuff, he's just too hard to play, and man, he gets stuck on frontline real bad now.
Yeah, one of the other things we didn't really anticipate with this patch was how popular 4 Bodyguard would become, which makes life really difficult for Urgot, especially the non-Runan's Hurricane version, which is the version we nerfed. So kind of all these combined with Chemtech also just made Urgot a lot weaker this patch.
Galio. These Galio adjustments I think were a success. Galio's still Galio. He's still good. We still have this problem that I think we're going to be working on solving soon, which is 1-star Colossus suck, 2-star Colossus are great. Need to fix. It's a big problem.
Yep, I agree.
Kai'Sa. Okay, so do you remember when we did this and we did the rundown and we're like, maybe we're overkilling it here, maybe a little bit. I can say with confidence, we did not overkill Kai'Sa. She's still the best 5 cost in the game.
Yeah, definitely the best, like highest. Not Tahm Kench, but Kai'Sa's still really, really good despite all of these different hits to comps that she's played in. So, yeah.
My big problem with Kai'Sa right now is that she doesn't need traits. She doesn't need anything. It's just find a Kai'Sa still with a GA Morello 3rd item. Who gives a crap? And like that, just throwing that in literally any team is almost always.
Yeah, I think the biggest culprit here to me is like GA just makes her so safe. She's already such a safe unit, and then she gets to be even safer and drop aggro. If she just like, if it was like a Warmogs, it's like she doesn't drop aggro, Jhin is gonna eventually 4th shot her, and then she will die. But then because of GA, it makes her too safe.
Yeah, she's serving that role of like, if you get to a capped endgame board, I think Jace is maybe the second closest. But like, she just gets out of control, especially when you're running a Colossus frontline, because those Colossus frontlines live so long that Kai'Sa ends up eventually just getting her 3rd or 4th or 5th cast, and the game's over at that point. She really does remind me of Kayle.
Yep. A healthier iteration of Kayle, but still Kayle, so something we need to think about for the future.
Tahm Kench nerf, good, not enough. Tahm Kench 3 buff, hilarious, hasn't caused any problems, so props to that. That's a fun change.
I love seeing those GIFs or like videos of Tahm Kench going around with 100,000 health eating things.
Let's see here. GA, we band-aid solved this with a big old health nerf that doesn't actually address the real issue, but really it was what we needed to do. And guess what? People still build GA because it's still a good item, because we didn't actually nerf the thing people use it for, which we can't. And so, it is what it is until it isn't.
Long-term issue to solve, but still this band-aid I think actually does a lot. When units revive, they pretty much die a lot faster. Sometimes they just get 1 tap. Like Kai'Sa revives at 250. If she's not full mana, she dies. It's like, it's great.
That's been nice, actually. I agree. That has been. Morello, we nerfed it 20%. It's still good. People still build it. Good. Feels good. RFC. I think this item's really good now. I think this item is a great spot. I find it actually, the scary thing is it might be better than Ginsu's now by like a wide margin. So I know, like, if you look at like Shaco or pretty much any melee champion, would you rather have Ginsu's or this? I think it's this every time.
Especially ones that like Shaco or Talon who end fights pretty fast. Oh, and that Talon build that popped up that uses RFC, that's really great to see. And then there was that Reddit thread about Victor using a second Shojin or RFC to buff the first Shojin. That kind of stuff makes the item more usable in more situations. So it's a good change.
Yeah, I think we just have a gross thing to solve between this and.
Agree. Yeah.
Sunfire. Credit to whoever changed these numbers, but I think Sunfire actually came out on top. I think this actually ended up being more of a buff than a nerf. Pretty happy with this change. Sunfire's still in a good spot.
Yep, I agree. I think you made these changes, Mark.
Zerat Portal. This one I think worked out really well. Interestingly enough, and I mentioned this to lobby too, but like in the data, this item actually looks nutty. Like not like broken nutty, but like it's the best item to slam at 2-1 if you believe our data. Because now it actually scales and it's pretty good in the late game. I've seen it buy a lot of time for certain comps like Jhin comps or Arcanist comps. So I actually think this item is really good now, and I think a lot of people below like our top 50 players are like kind of sleeping on this item right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think this item suffers from like people prioritizing backline items super hard right now, or like just chalices and stuff. So, but yeah, this item's definitely in a much better spot, especially after this buff, and it was already good before. So,
all right, small changes. Gonna browse through these quick. Shrug it off. Still didn't move the needle enough. Still not pretty desirable. Smoke bomb. I think this change was unnecessary, but at least it's a little clearer now, so that's good. Sunfire board and weak spot no longer being mutually exclusive. Fine. Small change there. Anything to
add? No, I think you covered it.
Metamorphosis. Hilariously enough, I think this change mattered from 10 AP to 20 AP for a fully capped Metamorphosis board. I think Metamorphosis is finally where it should be. I think it feels balanced but good. I've definitely seen this comp do well now. So pretty happy with where Metamorphosis is. If other mutants get brought up, there's a chance this might have to go back down to 1-2. But overall seems good.
Yep, I agree.
All right, Garen. We buffed Garen a little bit because honestly, Garen was like the worst early game unit. We still have this problem. We've still got to figure out this problem, especially if Garen sticks around for the mid set. But basically, Garen 1 is a joke, Garen 2 is meh, and Garen 3 is like, oh wait, now we're in a Ligma comp. This thing's insane.
Yeah, this buff basically helps that comp, but not him outside. So,
Graves. This didn't move the needle up enough, honestly. And to be honest, Graves still has kind of the same problem as Garen, where it's like you really only play this guy if you're like maybe using GP to carry, but like even then you usually want GP to lose. So Graves is another one in a weird spot that I'm not happy with. Alawi, this change didn't really move the needle much. Kassadin, this nerf was good. I'm glad this nerf went through, but again, Ligma continues to be very resilient. And then finally, Twisted Fate. I actually think, and I'm the one who did this one, so I'll call myself out. I think this was a mistake. I think we should have either not done anything or maybe only +5. Because right now TF is the best opener by a significant margin, and it's still blue buff Morello. Did he need compensation?
Yeah. We'll call it on the Graves one too. It's like he's used and built diff, but other than that, yeah, that didn't move the needle much. But TF, I agree. I think we should have went with a smaller compensation. It would have been weird to not compensate him though, but yeah.
Kog'Maw. I think this is a good change. Kog'Maw 3 isn't quite as a dominant force as he was in the Ligma comp. I think this is where it was supposed to be. I think it feels balanced now, as balanced as Kog'Maw can be. But called it. Talon, I'm glad we did this change. I know there's some people out there who like don't like dying to Talon comps. Talon's OP now, but Talon's not OP. He's just a good carry now, and like, cool. Talon's playable. This is good. Happy days. And then the Zilean change didn't change anything. Fine.
What do you mean? There's the Zilean reroll comp that's taking over the no, but it's okay. It works. There's a Zilean reroll comp, and it is okay. It's fun. But the Kog'Maw change, I think that one's really good. I know Mort has been talking about making this change for a long time. We're just kind of afraid to pull the trigger because it makes Kog'Maw basically not scale as he levels up, and it looks really weird from a player perspective. But I'm glad we finally did it, and it worked out.
All right, Echo. I think this actually was one of the good Morello changes. I think Echo needed the buff to compensate for Morello, and I think it's good. Same with Lissandra, although I'll call out Lissandra. Like, someone was pointing this out to me yesterday that like he only gained 75 spell damage on a star up. I think we still have some work to do with Lissandra. But I'm glad we gave her this compensation buff. That was correct. Samira, same thing. I'm glad we did this. I know you were nervous about this Samira change, but honestly, I think this was good. And honestly, we probably could have done a little more. Samira is still really hard to play until she's a star. or unless you high roll a 2-star Samira in like 2-5, 2-6. She's still really hard to play. And then Vex. I think Vex is probably right where she should be. The one thing we'll call out is like I think this might have made the 3 opener with like when you get Ziggs, Poppy, Vex too good. And so that might have been a mistake on this part.
Yeah, I agree. Having to balance between like Vex not in Yordle Econ versus Vex in like, in the opener where you're trying to just get an Econ, it's that thing is tough. But yeah, I think this is a good change for Vex overall and for Samira. I agree. We probably could have helped her in the damage. I was pretty nervous because of how many buffs we were doing to the comp, and she was already kind of good, but ends up with like all the meta shifts and everything. She ended up in like a pretty difficult to play spot already.
Orianna, I think the Orianna change here, I think this is a tricky one because my honest opinion is actually this was a mistake. But it wasn't a mistake in the sense that, like, because Orianna needed buffs and we needed to make her more playable. I think it was the wrong place to distribute that power that she needed to be buffed. Because, man, when Orianna gets going with, like, these Chalice comps and, like, the shields, it is frustrating. You feel like you can't kill anything. That was probably not the place to buff her. If anything, maybe we should have done, like, damage. Or if we're going to up the mana, we, like, up the damage, lower the shield. But she's shielding a little too much that I'm comfortable with. Sion 1 buffs. I think there's some people memeing on us here for like, oh my god, they buffed Sion. We buffed Sion 1. I think that was correct. And I think it didn't actually do anything. I think people still don't play Sion 1. It's like you hold Sions until you hit Sion 2 and then you put him in. So I actually think this change did nothing. And we still have that same Colossus problem we already talked about. And then finally the Yone change. This is another one I think we got memed on pretty hard. It's like, what? You're nerfing Yone? I can't believe it. But believe it or not, I think this change was actually fine. I think Challenger comps are still okay. They do still struggle right now in this current meta with the high shields because Challenger needs to burst things down pretty quick. But I've still seen Yone comps be quite successful with like Knife's Edge, the right items. So overall, you could debate if that one was necessary, but it's in small, and honestly, I don't think it moved the needle either way.
Yep. I think you covered everything for this.
Great. Victor change, good. Victor's good. Still, he has the same problem, I think, though, where 1 star is a little weak, 2 stars really, really good, but Victor's Victor. He's good when he's good.
Yep.
All right. Chalice. This was a giant mistake. Shouldn't have done this. I'm glad we didn't do that. I'm glad we pulled the Zeke's one. We almost did the Zeke's one, too. I'm glad we pulled this, and we just have to fight that urge when people are like, I never build Chalice, and it's like, well, you should, because it's good. We're just going to have to learn that lesson and just... These items are where they should be, and stop buffing them, and stop ever considering buffing them.
These types. Go ahead. Sorry, that was these types of flex items. Just we had to be careful with them. Flex or items.
And then finally, Static Shiv. This is just correct. And guess what? Static Shiv's still really nasty. I think right now, especially again with the prevalence of early game Arcanists, like I see a lot of Shiv slams now at high elo. Like people have figured out that this item is still good, and so this nerf was great.
Yeah.
So, all right, hyper roll, some minor changes, some bug fixes. Bug fixes good. That was about it, and we didn't B-patch it. So the fact that we didn't have to B-patch it, I think, says a lot. We got kind of lucky. Not lucky, but we did our job well. I don't think we hit everything. I think we missed a few things that we could have hit. Tom Kench, we probably could have hit harder. Kaisa, we probably could have hit a little harder. Yordles, we probably didn't quite get exactly right. Mercenary, I think Mercenary is still another one that, like, when it's good, it's really good. Augment Balance continues to be one. But overall, I think for the time frame we had, I'm calling this a success.
Yeah, totally agree. I think, especially on Tom Kench, I know you wanted to nerf him further, but I was afraid that that was kind of a big nerf already, and we're hitting. We were already hitting him basically pretty hard. You want to hit his damage some more too, which was like the cool part of him. But yeah, basically, like I think this is a big improvement on the previous patch. I think we still have a lot of work to do, and so for the rundown, you can hear about the stuff we thought about after thinking about this patch.
Yeah, I will say, even if I'm right, like let's say, I wanted to nerf Tom Kench more and we went more conservative. Even if I was right, it still wasn't the wrong call, right? Because we got burned in the past about this, about over nerfing. And I think, again, going incremental without giant meta shifts. So even though it ended up being incorrect and we should have done more on Tom Kench and Kaisa, I'm still happy we made the calls we did, because it's not the giant meta shifts that we've talked about that like can churn our player base. And right now, Set 6 is popular. Players are still playing. They're not going away, which is crazy. It's awesome. And so I think making sure we don't fuck that up was the right call. So again, even though, yes, Kai'Sa and Tahm Kench might need more, I'm glad we took this.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's true. Move slowly. Don't want to do bounce thrashes because that scares players away and it's not fun.
Exactly. So cool. All right, that is gonna do it for us this time. Hopefully you guys enjoy these. As always, this is us talking about these. At this point, I'm gonna stop saying if you like them or not. It seems like the people who like them. Probably keep doing them as long as Kent and I have the free time. So, we'll keep doing them. Anything else to say, Kent?
No. Have fun playing TFT. Glad everyone's enjoying it.
All right. Well, this video goes live on Saturday, which will be the day after your birthday. So, happy birthday yesterday.
Thanks, Mort. Happy birthday, Prior Kent.
All right. That's going to do it from us. Until next time, easy.